My name is Theodora Eaton, and this is my presentation on literacy theories and practice applications. So we'll go ahead and start as I pull this up. So in this presentation, we will be discussing one learning theory as well as two literacy theories. These are constructivism, inquiry learning, and schema theory. And then we'll also talk about how they correlate and some implications as educators, what we can expect to see in a classroom that practices these theories, as well as how they correlate with each other and overlap with their ideas. Next, we'll talk about practical applications for classroom teachers. This will look like strategies and specific things that educators can do within their classroom to ensure that students are learning using these theories and really kind of inquiring or putting all of these theories together into one and picking and choosing how this can look within your particular setting, whether that be a special education setting, a gifted classroom, middle school, high school, elementary school, whatever the classroom is. All of these theories can be used within that setting. Next, we'll talk about integrating technology, what this looks like in our fast-paced technology world, how students can use technology through the lenses of constructivism and inquiry learning and schema theory, and how we can guide them to use these theories, and for us to use these theories using the technology that we've been given and all that our students are now equipped with. And then lastly, we'll talk about just some takeaways and lessons that I have learned over the course of this semester, as I've done a lot of research on these theories, how I've grown to have a better understanding of them, how they correlate together, and what to do in my particular classroom setting as a middle school special education teacher. So we'll go ahead and begin. We'll start with our learning and literacy theories. And our first one we'll talk about is constructivism. So this is just some information that I've gathered on constructivism and where it came from, its foundational principles. And constructivism was created by Lev Vygotsky, who used his previous experiences growing up. He had a private tutor that would come to his house and would teach him primarily through conversation, and would build these learning experiences for him through language and social experiences. And so he gained a lot of his insight on constructivism through his own experiences. And constructivism, is often thought of as not just one theory, but it is an assimilation of multiple theories based on previous research conducted. So some of this research has to do with social constructivism, cultural, and a lot of what Vygotsky gained his information and his understanding from is from Piaget's cognitive development theory. And in a short synopsis, Piaget's cognitive development theory just outlines the or how a human goes and learns throughout stages of life. And so he specifically outlines specific stages that a human will go through from birth all the way through adolescence, and what to expect as far as how that person learns and what they are capable of in each setting. So this was the first really fully laid out cognitive theory that was developed, and it was groundbreaking at that time. And scholars and psychologists at that time were not did not have a lot to go off of, because there wasn't a lot of research that was done at that time on cognitive development, and especially through the lens of education. And education psychology was not really a strong subject until Vygotsky and that generation came through. And so Vygotsky used a lot of Piaget's cognitive development theories, but he was the kind of the social aspect of Piaget's cognitive development theory, more like his counterpart. And so though it was similar, Vygotsky argued that against Piaget's cognitive development, saying that children can learn, and children's best learning comes from experiences, comes from how they develop language, how they communicate with others, their ability to cooperate and do tasks together in various settings. And so Vygotsky did a lot of his work on the relational aspect of it, while Piaget did a lot of his work on the cognitive development side of it. So I've mentioned a little bit about Vygotsky's focus on language, and he focused a lot on his language and social experiences throughout various stages of the physical development. So he kind of incorporated much of Piaget's stages, but put language within those stages as kind of more broken down steps of when a child has these language experiences at certain ages, what to expect as far as learning. And he also developed a kind of a lens, or an idea, a theory, or a more of a observation that teachers still use to this day, called the zone of proximal development. And in short, the zone of proximal development, or ZPD, is the window in which learning is most effective for a student. And so this is just that window that a student is challenged enough, however, is not too challenged. It's not beyond their capabilities, but they're still able to gain knowledge based on their prior knowledge and what they bring into that zone, and what they're going to achieve when they pass through that zone. And so thinking about it in today's concepts and worlds, this was a pretty foundational concept that educators at this time did not really have a word for, really have a term, or didn't think about so much. And so this really opened up the door for more creative teaching and learning. It opened the door for educators really to get an idea of how to teach their students most effectively, because at this time there was no real guidelines or what to do or what not to do with your students. And so the zone of proximal development was pivotal in the education world at this time. And along with the zone of proximal development, Vygotsky did a lot of his research by observing children play. And he was a strong supporter of play, and argued that children learn how to self-regulate, or use their self-control, critical thinking skills, their communication skills, regulate their thoughts and their actions through real play, which Vygotsky defined real play as play that was intentional, that had a specific purpose, that grew the child in a specific area, that challenged the child within either a cognitive way, an emotional way, a social way, a cultural way. So it wasn't just play simply to play, but it was an intentional play environment. And he used a lot of his observations and experiences watching children play within this real play environment to develop the zone of proximal development and see how children can go from one zone to another based on how challenged they can be within that environment. And I have seen this just in my own experiences, how the zone of proximal development is something that I use frequently, and especially within my sphere with serving students with specifically learning disabilities, reading specifically. They have reading comprehension difficulties, and it is my job as their teacher to determine where their zone of proximal development is, and that takes time. It takes excuse me, time to see where they are, what they can do, what they can almost do, as far as what would be challenging enough for them to complete, but that would also provide them with the satisfaction of success, which I am a strong proponent in allowing children to feel success as they work hard towards a specific goal. And the zone of proximal development allows me to give them those small goals so that they can attain those things and see success on a regular basis. And for children with a learning disability, or really with any disability, it can get very discouraging for them if they see their peers don't struggle as much as they do, and they have to work twice as hard. And so it is my job to kind of outline that zone for them and say, here is what you are bringing into that zone, their prior knowledge, and here is where we are going to end, and here's the goal of that, and helping them stay within an effective struggle zone, where they do struggle, but they do not struggle long term. It's a temporary struggle. So I have seen how this can be used within specific settings, and the specialized settings as well. The next thing we'll talk about is inquiry learning theory, and inquiry learning has to do with active participation for students to inquire, to discover, to hypothesize, experiment. This is where students with the aid of a facilitator or their teacher, create a question, or based on the topic or content that they are studying, they are presented with a question to further discover, further research on their own. And so this is a student-centered approach where teachers take a facilitator approach, take a backseat approach, while learners discover on their own, independently using the materials that are provided by the teacher. And this principle was based on John Dewey's development of inquiry learning. This principle was developed on the unfoldment theory, which pretty much states that students learn best when they are able to unfold or discover learning for themselves. And so we will continue this presentation in part 2.